Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us on this Coffee with the Principals. And we are having a school counseling takeover. So, our topic for today will be understanding mental health. If you are not aware, the counseling department has quarterly parent um, parent mental health sessions. We talk about different topics, and this is our third one of the year. So today is understanding mental health, where we're going to go over a broad spectrum of a little bit of everything. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit about each of us. My name is Mrs. Bravo. I am the TK through third school counselor. So on this slide, you can see my email, and you can also see my school phone number. So if you ever wanted to reach me regarding a student in the TK through third grade, feel free to shoot me a call or a text on that number, and I'll be able to get back to you as soon as I can. And for our fourth through sixth grade counselor, we have Miss Leon, and she is here as well today. You'll hear from her in just a second, and that is her number. And then our middle school counselor with seventh and eighth grade is Miss Haro. So we're going to jump right in to an overview of our presentation. But before we do that, actually, I want to remind you all that we are going to be doing a raffle at the end of our presentation. So if you are here right now, your name will be put in a raffle. And we will announce the winner at the end of our presentation. So you must be present to win. So if you are here and we call your name, then you will win a $15 gift card. And it is $15, right, Ms. Hado? Yes. Okay. So $15 gift card. So who doesn't love a $15 gift card? So thank you so much for being here again, and an overview of our presentation. First, we're going to talk about what is mental health and how can we support our child. We're going to discuss anxiety, discuss depression, suicidal ideation, LGBTQ students and suicidal ideation, and as well as steps that you can take as a parent or guardian and how to support your student if they're going through any of these things. And if you have any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I think you can do that, and then we can call on you. So going into mental health. So what is mental health? Mental health is our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it affects how we think, feel, how we act, and it also affects how we handle stress or how we relate to others or make choices. So mental health is important at every stage of our life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. So with mental health, we can think about the way that our students are going through their day-to-day life. So if you as an adult have ever experienced anything like anxiety or like stress, students feel it too. So that's why it's important to talk about mental health. And going into the basic principles of mental health, it really comes down to being linked to the functions of our brain. A lot of research just backs this up. So our brain's basic instinct is to keep us safe. So you might have heard of that fight or flight mode, and this is kind of where that can come in sometimes with students. When the threat is detected, our brain reacts to protect us. So it's kind of like if you're walking along the street and you see something at the corner of your eye, let's say, I don't know, it's a piece of paper or a bird, and you kind of flinch. It's that instinct reaction to protect. And that happens as well with mental health. So mental health is determined by neuroscience and neurochemistry, and as well as genetics. So if you have a tendency to have like a lot of anxiety run down in your family, or depression, or any sort of addictions, those things are proven to be passed along. And it's just important that you are aware of it so that it's something you can tame. So there's this quote that I really love, and you might have heard it. It's called, "If you can name it, you can tame it." So for me personally, sometimes if I'm ever feeling anxiety in my chest, I have to kind of think about what I'm feeling, name it, and then I know that once I can name it and identify what I'm feeling, I can start to feel better. And that works the same way with our children, with our students. Most interventions require cognitive restructuring of neural pathways, and safety is always first. So going into how it affects our children. So signs that a child might be struggling with mental health specifically. So if you're seeing pervasive changes in mood or behavior, so maybe you're noticing sadness, or if your student is withdrawing. So what that can look like is typically they're talking to you about their day, they have a lot to say, and now you're asking them about their day and how they're feeling, and you're not getting a lot back from them. If that's different behavior than what you're used to, then that might be a sign that they're struggling with their mental health. They might also be experiencing sudden, overwhelming fear for no reason, sometimes with a racing heartbeat or fast breathing. Students may also show that they're struggling with mental health by getting in fights or wanting to hurt others, or showing severe out of control behavior that can hurt themselves or others. What we've been seeing lately in the middle schools are students who are struggling with eating, they're throwing up, or they're using laxatives to make themselves lose weight, or they're just struggling with their weight in general, with their relationship with food. There are also issues of social issues. So that can be having intense worries or fears that are getting in the way of daily activities, or maybe experiencing extreme difficulty controlling their behavior or putting themselves in physical behavior, uh, causing issues at school. We've also seen signs of children struggling with mental health by having severe mood swings that can cause problems in their relationship. Um, Again, eating patterns, eating more or less than usual, purging, unexplained weight loss, and then lastly, sleeping patterns. Maybe they're sleeping way more or way less than usual, but just typically an unusual sleep schedule is going to cause or may show signs that your child is struggling with mental health. You should also pay particular attention if they have experienced loss of a loved one, divorce or separation of their parents, or basically any major transition, a new home, if they just started school at Feaster, any sort of traumatic experience like living through a natural disaster, teasing, bullying, difficulties in school. I know there's a quote that parents often, that I hear in the community, whether it be here at Feaster or anywhere. I hear a lot that, you know, children are resilient, and children are resilient to a certain extent. But if we are taking precautionary measures to keep up with our child and their mental health, then that's how we can help them to the best of our ability, no matter how resilient they may seem. So, what might activate mental health episodes? Just like I mentioned, major transitions and trauma, parental divorce, bullying, trouble with peers. So I did go over this, and these are things that I really urge you to keep an eye out for your student if they have experienced anything like this, and how you can help them. Sorry about that. And how you can help them. We will, at the end of our presentation, we're going to have resources on how you can help your child. But a big one would be to just the first step, reaching out to your counselors. And we are here for you, and that's why we know that this presentation is. We hope that if you have any questions, you do let us know and you reach out to us. So we'll stop there for just a second. Does anyone have any questions or any comments, anything they want to share any of our parents? And I do see here that we have two amazing administrators. We have Mr. Villarreal and we have Ms. Ramirez, our executive director, and we have our middle school principal. So thank you for being here, and thank you parents for taking the time out of your day. So we're going to jump into anxiety. So go ahead and take it away, Ms. Leon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Ms. Leon, and so I'm going to talk about what is anxiety. So you can see we did put a definition. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what it is and what the signs would look like. So everybody experiences anxiety sometimes, especially when faced with unfamiliar, dangerous, or stressful situations. Anxiety is a normal response to a perceived threat, and it includes physical, emotional, and mental responses, such as increased adrenaline, feelings of worry and confusion, and thoughts about danger. or catastrophic outcomes. So what can activate anxiety? Anxiety can be triggered in different ways. Many of the sources could be, but not are limited to, fear of social situations, fear of negative evaluation or rejection, fear of performing in public, a fear of specific object or situation, could be like storms, lightning, thunder, bugs, fear of being separated from a parent, caregiver, or guardian, or fear about them being harmed, fears of harm to self, or fears about academic performance, exams, fears about starting school or doing work, generalized fears about the future. A lot of times we see that when they don't know what's going to happen. So the fear of the unknown can be huge. And you can see we listed some more symptoms of anxiety, some I briefly discussed. So sometimes we see these in children and young people, and that displays differently depending on the situation. So a lot of young children, the anxiety that looks like clinging to a parent or guardian, clinging to somebody, or it could be a tantrum, not wanting to go to school or withdrawing from friends. That could be sometimes also avoiding a particular object or situation. Sometimes we see anxiety stem from wanting to be a perfectionist, wanting to be the best. And sometimes we see anxiety display as like shyness or being slow. And or anxiety is negative thoughts that are like reoccurring or pessimistic thoughts. So anxiety oftentimes can look like a young person who's just being quiet and compliant, but sometimes those are the symptoms that are overlooked. We think, oh, that student is just quiet and they always listen and follow directions, but sometimes that is a sign of anxiety. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Heather. So what are the impacts of anxiety? So when anxiety is left untreated, or we don't assist or support, we can see a number of problems that can lead into adolescence or adulthood. So if anxiety becomes chronic, it can be diagnosed as an anxiety disorder. Anxiety problems could be related to performing poorly in school, missing out on important social experiences, sometimes can be paired and experienced with depression or relationship issues. You could be engaging in substance abuse, and sometimes it will correlate. It can correlate with other disorders such as, like I said, depression, eating disorder, or sometimes ADHD, also known as attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. That is about the anxiety. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment about anxiety or reach out to a counselor. But now we will talk about depression. So what is depression? You see we listed the definition right there, but depression, how it be diagnosed and how it differentiates from sadness is the symptoms must last at least 2 weeks or longer, and there must be a change in the behavior. So different than what you saw before. So oftentimes we can see the definition of sadness and depression used interchangeably, but they are different. So how you can kind of also differentiate between sadness or depression and or grief, because sometimes grief can look like depression, is thinking about the biochemistry. So depression does stem from the chemicals in the brain being different and can link to depression. Sometimes it's genetic, like Ms. Bravo said earlier. Anxiety and depression can be genetic and can be passed down from families. So oftentimes if an older family member has it, it can also run in the younger generation. Personality. So oftentimes people with depression, you'll see they have low self-esteem. They're easily overwhelmed. And so that's another easy sign to identify the difference between sadness and depression, or sadness and grief. Grief, you won't see the self-esteem lower typically. And then also you could think about environmental factors. If there's anything with the environment, the living situation, sometimes that can cause depression. So we'll go right into symptoms of depression as you see listed above. So these are typically signs that you will see. And sometimes they look like I said, sadness or bad mood. Oftentimes they are sad, lonely, unhappy, and can come off as grouchy. Like I said, have to last at least more than 2 weeks. They can be self-critical. So children or young people who are going through depression may complain a lot. They may say things like, I can't do this right, or I don't have any friends, or sometimes it's too hard for me, but that doesn't always mean depression. But there's a lack of energy and effort, and you can notice oftentimes they don't want to get up and go to school. They don't want to get out of bed, or they'll glue to just one thing, not generally doing things that interested them before. So the things that they used to enjoy, they typically stop doing those, and their sleep and eating patterns do change. So keep note of that as well. If you notice any of these symptoms, they sometimes don't feel like eating, or they may overeat. They complain of aches and pains. Sometimes they can say it's a stomach ache or some other pain, and can miss school, saying that they don't feel well, but it could be a sign of anxiety or depression. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So impacts of depression, you can see those listed above. If you do see any of these and you're not sure what to do, now you are a little more familiar with the signs, and you can study up on them a little bit more, familiarize yourself with them. You know your child, you know your student, you know what their typical activity looks like, what their interests are. So just recognizing when that changes, and kind of being a little more aware. Try to keep the conflict at home low if possible. I know it's easy to be frustrated if the energy does change, but just kind of thinking about that maybe they're going through something, and then checking in with their mental health. Try not to get involved in little battles. Think about the big picture. Be as nurturing and warm and accepting as possible. Try not to argue with other adults around in front of them. Modeling positive ways to take care of yourself is really huge, like taking a walk together, visualizing the future and deep breathing. Help your child shift that negative thinking. So earlier I mentioned those statements like I can't do this, or I can't do things right, like helping them think about it in a neutral way or a positive way if possible. So oftentimes when we're depressed, we feel hopeless and we can't see positive or see the future being positive. Listening to your child when you're talking to them, really being in the moment. That's one of the best gifts we can give our children, is our attention as much as humanly possible. I know it's hard when we all have different things going on, but being in the moment with them is basically what I'm asking or suggesting. Practicing mindfulness if you can. Mindfulness does have studies that proven to help lower depression and anxious behavior. There's a lot of great resources online like YouTube. Practicing those deep breathing is also a form of mindfulness, and really working on that sleep and nutrition as much as possible. Maintaining proper sleep cycles is huge for children and adolescents. When they don't get enough sleep, it just results in many different ways. Especially we see in mental health, it's really affecting their mental health. So what else can you do? If you see any signs of anxiety or depression, talk to your child, talk to your student, listen to them, maybe set up a doctor's visit, expressing to the doctor what you're seeing, what you're noticing, and let the doctor help you determine what the next step would be. If you feel inclined to reach out to a therapist, or your doctor suggests a therapist, that would also be beneficial, letting them talk to someone else about their depression or anxiety. Just trying to be patient as much as possible. Children don't know how to navigate these big feelings sometimes, and sometimes adults don't really know either. So just trying to take a deep breath and be as patient and kind as possible when they are feeling these big feelings and big emotions. They're trying to navigate through them, and enjoying time together, really being in the moment, playing a game, that walking, maybe watching a funny movie together as a family. Children love doing all those things together. So really spending that quality time together. And now we'll let Ms. Hato go.
Hi, everybody. So the next couple of slides that I'm going to be talking about are really heavy topics, and so I'm going to go slowly because it is, when we say the word suicide or when we talk about suicide, it can bring up a lot of emotion, right? It can bring a lot of, it's almost like a threatening word for those who haven't had experience with it, for those who have just wondered, like, don't say the word, because then now we're planting it in people's heads. So I am going to be talking about suicide and suicidal ideation. But just as a disclaimer, this is not all inclusive. This is literally just the surface of just the basic information of suicide and suicidal ideation. Us as counselors, we do have experience in being able to talk about suicide. So if you would like a deeper understanding, a more private conversation at any point, you are welcome to contact us and be able to have that conversation with us. It is not taboo. It is something that happens. It is something that kids think about. It is something that teens think about, adults. It affects everyone at any point in life. It affects all races. And it affects all people. So we should be having these very difficult conversations, be using these very difficult, tough words, because the more that we are educated ourselves, the more we become comfortable with using the terminology, the better that we can communicate to our children who we are trying to keep safe at all times. So just as a disclaimer, because I know it's not easy to hear a lot of the time. So suicide is complicated and nuanced, but there are certain things that we should know, that every person who is a gatekeeper, every person who has contact with a child should have some basic information in knowing how to address this topic. Suicidal ideation means thinking about death, thinking about killing oneself, about dying by suicide. And it is not, like I said, it's not for one particular population. It can happen to anybody, and it is tied to mental health and mental health disorders. Suicide is not caused by one thing. It is not. We hear the stories of, a student was being bullied and he died by suicide, or she died by suicide. It is not that clear cut. Bullying or family situations, not one thing causes suicide. It is always a web of things that were happening in the life, of neuroscience that was happening in the brain, that can lead to this atrocious outcome. So here are the things that we have to really think about, and some of the things that our counselors have talked about already is what we're looking for is change. Change is, and you're like, okay, Miss Adam, like, everyone changes. That's the only certain thing, right? We're talking about drastic changes. You as a parent are so in tune with your student that it gives you a gut feeling when something is not right, when something is different. Listen to that gut feeling, because it is a way of communication. You are communicating non-verbally with your child, and you're noticing that those changes in eating, in sleeping, in socializing, in mood and behavior, are going to be signs that something is different. We don't know what. We are not clinicians. We're not going to diagnose your child. And the information presented today is not medical advice. We also don't want you to self-diagnose or diagnose your child like, oh, I've noticed those things, so you must be depressed. This is just basic information for you to have to make some informed choices of what next steps may be. So signs of suicidal ideation is obviously, a direct threat. I want to kill myself. I want to die. I don't want to live anymore. Sometimes kids do say this as a reaction. They're so mad, or they're so upset. I just want to kill myself. I just want to die. And so parents can sometimes shrug it off, and we shouldn't. And I'll go over that later. So any sign of like, I want to die, I want to kill myself, anything like that is a direct threat. It should be taken seriously. Being preoccupied with death, not yet. Being preoccupied with death, I've seen drawings, very dark drawings of, sometimes it includes violence. Sometimes it includes just like an internal turmoil in a drawing or in writing. Poems, songs that may be written, journal entries, all of that is something to be wary of. Starting to give away belongings. Something that's really important, I don't know, they have a really important stuffed bear and they give it to the younger sibling. I want you to have this. I want you to keep it. I want you to make sure it's safe. Starting to give away the important possessions can be a sign that a person is thinking of suicide. Withdrawing from friends and family. My number one antidote is socializing, because what I know and what we know is that as soon as a person starts to isolate, something is wrong. We are social beings. We are meant to be in a community. We are meant to work within a society. So any kind of signs of social isolation is going to be a big red flag in thinking like, something might be up. Having aggressive or hostile behavior, again, that change in behavior is so important. Just changes is what we're looking for. Not the hygiene portion. So the more physical stuff, the hygiene portion, starting to dabble in drugs and alcohol, trying to run away or just get out of the house without permission, not showing up to the house. And then changes in personality. When it's not your kid. And I think we've all been through moments like, I'm not talking about just a day, right? We're talking about, like Ms. Leon was saying, a persistent change that's that we have to be mindful of. So if anything, just know change tells you something, follow your gut and seek resources. So next slide, please. So now let's talk about the other heavy topic that I think weighs on us heavily at schools and in parental conversations. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, questioning plus, because there are other identities, intersex, asexual, two-spirit. There's all these things. There's all these things that come to this acronym, and it is a very heated topic. Today, we're not talking about LGBTQ specifically. Again, this is just informational piece. We're starting the conversations here at Feaster on behalf of the counseling department, on behalf of everybody, because we think that the conversations are going to be important. We do need to hear all sides, but we also need to know the statistics. It's important to be educated, that if you have a really strong belief about something, that you also have all the information that you need to know to make educated, have an educated response or choices and things like that. So with suicide, not only has the pandemic really turned started the mental health conversation with our teens and with our young children. It's been 2 years of that. We separated our kids. We took our kids and put them in our houses to try to keep them safe from a virus that we didn't know what was going on. And so now we reintegrate after a year of having been at home. This is our first year back, and we have seen the changes in mental health. I have seen the uptick in anxiety. I have seen the uptick in depression. I have seen the uptick in eating disorder like patterns. I do see the increased sadness and just the behaviors, and it's not just Feaster. And so I think that's why it's important it's going to be our communities that have been affected. But one special population that we need to be talking about as well is our LGBTQ kids. Our kids who identify as something other than heterosexual. And this is not about sexuality. Okay, this is about who we are, who we feel we are as a person. This is not, just particularly like one act. It's a whole identity at the core of yourself. students who are identify under the spectrum have already so much to deal with. And so it is not a surprise that we see higher suicide rates in students or just people in general who identify as LGBTQ. So that's why I thought it was going to be important to bring it up. LGBTQ youth are twice as likely to think about suicide. So that suicidal ideation is likely for any student who identifies on the spectrum. LGBTQ youth are up to 7 times more likely to attempt suicide than heterosexual peers. And up to a third of transgender youth attempt suicide. And so then it's short-sighted, but easy to think that, oh, well, then it's because they're LGBTQ. It's actually the societal factors that have a large impact on the mental health of these youth, of these young people. So the risk factors that we see is all the bias, the stigma that comes with being part of this community. The discrimination that we see from not only societal norms, but also within individual people. The rejection that may come because of culture, because of tradition, because of religious beliefs, because of our faiths, because, whatever it may be, there is a lot of family rejection. And then all the other stressors that come with being part of this community. When you enter your campus and you don't look like you're supposed to look like, that immediately already changes something, that already gives you a different label. And so we have to be mindful. And I wanted to introduce this because this conversation is not going to end here, but we are having these conversations. We are educating our staff so that we can build not only a tolerance, but acceptance of all students, because the worst thing that we can think of is losing our young people to suicide. So, addressing this special population will be, one of our priorities here in the counseling center, because of that suicide prevention piece. Not only the mental health, but we don't want you to lose your child. So, it is something to consider. It can affect everybody, but we do see that it affects people disproportionately, certain people disproportionately, in this case, the LGBTQ students. So I know I said a lot about suicide, a lot about LGBTQ. Does anybody have anything that they want to drop in the chat? Any questions, anything like that, that you'd like to address right now? Okay, nothing's coming in.
Peace to parents, we've also enabled you to have the ability to unmute yourselves. If you're more comfortable speaking as opposed to chatting, you're more than welcome to unmute yourselves.
Okay. Well, if anything does come up, like I said, we are used to having these conversations. They're not going to be easy, but the more that we can inform you and educate our community, the better. Next. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Heather. So now let's talk about the prevention, not only the suicide prevention, but we really want to prevent our kids from feeling this way. So Ms. Leon already kind of went into it with the impact of depression and things that we can do to try to prevent it. So here's the information, and really what it is when you think of yourself when you were a teen, what were some of the things that you wish that you could have had differently? Or there's always this thing, right? Like, what would you tell your younger self? Well, what would you do for your younger self? And I think a lot of the answers come back to listening, being listened to, being understood. I said earlier that we are social beings, that we are meant to be connected. And so it is important that we are able to do that, connect with our young people, that we are not here to judge, that the only thing that they might need is somebody to be like, I get you, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, and I am here for you. That's really like bottom line, right? And so it'll detail certain things here. Increase resiliency, boost self-esteem, so not being critical or judgmental, not blaming, things like that. talking your student to listen, to understand, problem solving together. Our kids are going to dabble in things that we don't want them to dabble in. They're going to make bad choices. It's inevitable. We all make bad choices. So when we go and we tell them, okay, now you're punished and this is your consequence and that is it, you're not giving the chance to learn from the experience. So really problem solving together and coming up with a solution that works for you both and that will teach them a lesson to your student. The outdoors is magical. And I read somewhere that #1 medicine for mental health disorders is spending time outside. And I don't think I'm making this up. I think it is a fact. They've said that the exercise and outdoors and fresh air are actually more powerful than like medication that they can give you. Sometimes, obviously, if there's an imbalance, you'll need medication, but spending time outdoors is going to be so invaluable. With that, the opposite then is limiting the screen time and the social media. I wish we had so much more time to go into everything having to deal with this, but right now social media is showing a direct correlation between the use of social media with depression and anxiety in our teens, specifically in our teen girls. Screen time also doesn't allow you to socialize, right? It takes the face-to-face away. So that the chatting and the DMs takes the personalization away. And so not being able to feel another person's presence, not being around other people or talking directly to a person, and instead talking through a screen, through a phone or whatever it may be, is very harmful to the brain because we are social beings. We are supposed to be around each other. So limiting screen time is helps prevent it. Again, noticing those changes. As soon as you notice something, your gut feeling tells you something, it's because it's something. Talk to someone. Getting treatment at the earliest sign of a problem, educating yourself on these topics. Anyone who watches this recording, anybody who is here today, you are being educated on these topics. You're not shying away from the tough conversations and from learning more about what might be happening with your youth. And then reaching out for help because you are not alone. As a family, as a parent, they say it takes a village, and I think we all understand that that's true, right? The school is half of your village. We have your kids for 7 hours. So reaching out for help, this is not something that you should be afraid of or scared of, or like, oh, I don't want them to know that my child is suffering with this. Actually open up that conversation. The more people that we can get into your village, the more people that you can have supporting you, the better that your child will fare. Okay. And then I think it goes without saying, some things should be avoided. A lot of the conversations that I hear, or sometimes when I initiate a conversation about mental health, hey, I've been noticing that your student has been sad lately, or they've been visiting the counseling center so often. And some of those conversations naturally were like, well, Miss Sato, is it attention? Because all they want is attention. And sure, that might be it, but why do they need attention, right? That's what we need to be asking ourselves. So don't let them let's not ignore our kids and their emotions, even the little ones, because then it can snowball and it can become, and now they have a big outburst and now it's a problem. But also let's not shrug off like, oh, it's just a phase or it's gonna pass. Oh, I was like that when I was a teenager and I was fine. Times are different. And now with, again, access to social media and screen times and just the pandemic, and times are different. We can't shrug off any threats of suicide or any red flags that we feel, that we see the change in the kids. The isolation piece, let's not isolate. Have them be involved in sports, have them be part of our community, have them do our after school clubs. If you don't have access to anything outside, find those activities for those kids, keep them connected to you, have those conversations, check in with your child every single day, to see how they're doing, and you'll tell them like, how was your day? Oh, it's fine. And then a lot of the times that's kind of it. Have those questions that you want to know, what was your favorite part about your day today? What was a really hard part about your day today? you know, whatever it may be. It's important that you don't let your student
Taro,
isolate.
I have a question for you.
Yes, Ms. Lopez.
Anytime the kiddos go to the counseling office, even if it's just they, I don't know, like to hang out around there, the counseling department would let us parents know that they're seeking that attention, right? So then we can work together as a team and figuring out what's going on with the kiddos.
So, you know, so that's no and yes.
Okay.
Anytime that there is any safety issue, our parents will always be notified. Anytime that there is a threat to self, threat to others, or somebody is hurting a child, then we do notify the proper people, right? That's where like we communicate to you saying, hey, this was said, or I assessed for this, or the teacher referred him for that reason. Other than that, the counseling relationship is so nuanced. There's this thing that we have to build, right? Rapport. Our kids, our teen, especially my teen, well, because I work with the teenagers. But there's the relationship, right? The first thing that they don't want you to do is tell their parents. And so there's certain things that because it is not safety related, we do not disclose for confidentiality reasons, because our youth are humans too, because they don't come so that we can go and like, you know, if they wanted to tell everything to a parent, they would. So it's an interesting relationship that we have with our kids, and that we are indebted to their rights and to their confidentiality. So there are a lot of things like, oh, I have a boyfriend or I have a girlfriend or whatever it may be, that no, we're not going to notify the parents about that. And every time that they come in, I have some kids that come in multiple times a day. I'm not going to notify a parent if they're like coming and spending just some time with me. However, if I see like they're coming in and they're so sad and they won't talk to me and they won't tell me what's going on, then of course I would build that relationship, because I'm also indebted to you as a parent, right? So I'm going to build that relationship with you, and I'm going to call you and say, hey, I've noticed that your child is coming in 5 times a day and they're pretty sad and I have no idea why. Can you catch me up on what's been going on at home? So we have, you know, all of our stakeholders are important to us, but our first most important people is going to be your children. So there are, you know, so we're not going to notify you of everything, but we do notify you of any safety issues or of any concerns that we may have.
Gotcha. So anything concerning, then you would bring to our attention.
Absolutely.
And get us involved so we could support as well at home. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Taro.
Of course. Next slide, Ms. Scallion. And so now let's talk about that getting help piece. We have a full counseling staff with 3 counselors. The first time that we have 3 counselors on the Feaster campus. So we've created systems, and we're still working to create systems to make sure that your kids understand that they're connected to us, not just their teacher, that they do know that they have a safe space to come to whenever they need to throughout the day. So we have those systems, and you know, you can ask your kids, like, how do you get to the counseling center? And for our older kids, our 3rd through 8th graders, they'll tell you, like, we have a form and we can scan it on our iPad and it's going to take us to our form and it's going to put us in a line to go to the counseling center. That's the way to communicate with us. For our babies, for our TK and kinders and 1st and 2nd graders, they have access to, well, their teacher is the one that typically notices the red flags, right? Anything happens at the playground, or there's any issues, or there's crying or whatever, then the teacher is the one that usually communicates with Miss Bravo to let them know that we're having issues. So we do get our kids connected. However, how do you get connected to services? How do you get the help that you need, or reach out to see if like there's something up with your kid? The first, obviously, because we are not, like I said, we're not therapists, we're not clinicians, we're not doctors, we're not any of that. We're always going to recommend to get that medical advice, right? Your primary care doctor is the first person. If you're seriously concerned about a mental health disorder, or something that may develop into that, we do recommend that you go to your primary care doctor so they can do the proper referrals. But here at school, come talk to us. We're available. Get a meeting with us. Call us, text us, email us. All of our contact information, like this presentation, is going to be available to you guys. We'll make sure that the most important information, the links and things like that, can be accessible to you. but come have the conversation. Like I said, we're not going to shy away from the tough conversations, and we will let you know what we see, and if we know your child, and we'll come up with a plan. We'll help you out. And then obviously, you know, what's the famous thing? Google it. The online resources, you'll want to be able to do that research on your own, kind of, again, educate yourself. So we've thrown up here the suicide prevention lifeline.org. Those are all kinds of suicide prevention resources. This is a national lifeline, so not only the phone number, but just the resources that you can find online. And then that link, like I said, I'll make sure that it's accessible to you, because it will take you to a wealth of resources of how to start the conversations, how to notice something is wrong, and what you can do as a parent to be able to help your child. Okay, so any questions on these last portions on getting help, reaching out, what to avoid, what to do, kind of thing? Alrighty. So I think that brings us to the end of our conversation today. So we've talked about a lot. We've talked about mental health, signs to look out for. We've specifically talked about anxiety and depression and suicide, and specifically suicide with our LGBTQ community. We've talked about things that you can do and things that you should avoid. Thank you for coming along with us on this. Does anybody have any question before we do the raffle on any of the presentation, or just anything that you've been wondering about the Counseling Center? Do I hear somebody unmuting? No.
Ms. Haro, I unmuted myself.
Yes.
If there aren't questions, I'd like to, say thank you to the team for this great presentation, so informative and so important to our families to understand the emotions that their kids go through. And I do hope that families are able to better communicate with their children about their experiences here at school, and parents know that we have an amazing counseling team and room and center to support our students. And they do an amazing job of building relationships with our students so that the students feel safe from the get-go. Thank you, everyone, for all that you're doing to support our students team. And parents, of course, we're still here for any questions that you may have. I see some comments on the chat. I'm not sure if there's a question there, but thank you for Mrs. Lopez for the affirmation of this presentation by our counseling staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, we can't. Sorry, we couldn't hear you. We all froze.
I heard you, Ms. Real. Thank you so much for the praise, and thank you, Mr. Gordillo, in the chat, and the parents that are also expressing their kindness or their appreciation. So with that, if there are no more questions, we will go ahead and start the raffle. So we're doing it old school. I have put the names of the 4 parents in this little Ziploc bag, and I have shaken it, as you can see, for fairness. And I will pull a name. I have one right here. Irasu. So this is the winner of our $15 gift card. Thank you all, though, so much for being here. And just know, like everyone has reiterated, we are here for you. Miss Gallion, maybe we can go to the first slide with our contact information, and we can end on that. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great Tuesday. And let us know if you need absolutely anything. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so I'll be contacting you. You're going to have lunch on us. We have a Subway gift card for you today. So I'll contact you. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, ladies. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.